All right. I Question Everything podcast 002, number 2, the one and only Aneesh Chaudhry.
Thanks a lot for having me, bro.
Dude, thank you for joining.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Seeing what we can unpack with the state of the world and everything happening these days. It's just there's a lot of chaos, but I think a lot of good things too.
Mm-hmm.
Good in both.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's both. I think it's both light and dark going on. I think we're in a spiritual warfare, and you can just see that by people taking their lives or taking somebody else's lives or pretending like they don't have a response to what's going on around them. Victimization.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing because unfortunately we're never going to know why people do what they do. It's always difficult because we see those things and we have certain opinions about them, and it's very, very difficult to accept it that, like what could drive a person to be there or to go to that length. Like, we all experience stress to different degrees, but then there's just all different ways that people cope with it, and some are just able to better than others, unfortunately. It's just very, very difficult.
So this is what I have for setting the table and things like that. Nothing is crazier than the idea of life, so we should be able to share all ideals and have the courage to do so. I think that we are kind of thrown to the wolves too, man. I think it starts with education.
Yeah. No, it does. And I think that's where, talk about education in the school system.
Mm-hmm.
And going back, I think that there's so much that we should be taught and the kids should be learning in schools that they're not learning,
Mm-hmm.
that would ultimately set people up for more success in adulthood. Because I think that's a lot of the reason that different people are struggling at different points as adults is because they're not properly equipped as children as to how to handle everything that's coming their way.
So you're hitting on a lot of things. I would say, number one, how would you define success? What makes an adult versus child?
How would I define success? It's a great question. I think, like I was saying earlier, everyone's kind of got their own variation of it. I want to quote, like, there's a quote that was, and I'm going to paraphrase it. I don't remember who said it, but it was essentially saying that success in life is our ability to recover from setbacks. Because one person's version of success may include, fancy cars, house, clothes, and another person, they may not desire those things. So they may want to live a more simplistic life, and that could be their version of success. But I think ultimately for me, success is defined by happiness. And once again, that could open up the question of what is happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that it's just how are you able to wake up in the morning and just be excited for life? Like, I think if you can do that and your basic needs are met, like that's, I think, an idea of success. Of course, I strive for a little bit more than that. But I think if you can just try to be happy and content and grateful on a daily basis, to me, I feel like that would be a successful life. And I think a lot of people just don't have that joy and that gratitude and that love on a daily basis they're able to feel. Most people are just going through life stressed out, fearful, worried, anxiety, anger, lust, like a lot of those different, more tough emotions that kind of become people's baseline to operate. So I think success is, I take a different approach. It's not based on material things, but more the state of your being.
So that is another question then, which I think you're answering, but I'll just ask it explicitly. Do you think that money buys happiness?
No, I think money buys convenience, money buys access, money can buy relationships, but those things are not going to equate to happiness. I think for me as a businessman, I'll speak to my relationship with money personally. I look at money as a tool for creation because we don't need a lot of money to feed ourselves, to make sure we have water to drink, to have a roof over our head, resources for the family. I think that's what we need money for. But anything beyond that, I look at it, how can you use money as a tool to build, not just who you are, but like as a tool to build and create opportunities for other people, whether that's through employment or through mental health services, because that's largely what I work in and day out. So that's how I personally look at money. But no, it'll never buy happiness, no matter how much you want it to.
Mm-hmm.
That's the unfortunate truth of it.
And happiness, would you go to the quote, would you say ignorance is bliss? Is that a good definition for happiness, or is that one phrase that hits on happiness?
Ignorance is bliss is a tricky one, because I think it's good to be ignorant to a certain degree, because we're in an age of information with social media where there's so much coming at us, and that ultimately we have so much information we can consume. And that's where I think ignorance is bliss, in terms of like we have to tune out 98% of the information, because if you overconsume information, you just overwhelm yourself and cause more stress for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I think ignorance is good to a certain degree around a lot of things we just don't need to know, and are better off accepting that, there's a lot of things in the world we can't change. And I think just acceptance is a powerful tool when it comes to that.
So that harps on the question of what is ignorance.
So I'm going to use an Eastern definition of ignorance, because I studied Eastern philosophy in my own spiritual growth. And my family is from India. I was born and raised in Ohio, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
That my origins, so a lot of my spiritual growth, with meditation coming from the age of 19 to now, and studying different spiritual scriptures without kind of getting too deep into it. The way we kind of define ignorance is basically believing that what happens to us is the reality, is our reality, because there's always going to be different things happening to us. And I think we're in a state of ignorance if we let our circumstances and our environment define who we are, versus us defining who we are and creating our environment. Because I think that was a powerful shift for me when you go from a product of your environment to the creator of your environment. And that's where ultimately the world responds to you versus you responding to the world. And it's a simple but very, very deep and powerful thing. And that's where, the Eastern philosophy really comes in. It's very Buddhist in nature, but it's like, how do you detach from the things you don't know, accept them, and ultimately know that your mind shouldn't work against you, it should work for you.
So that would be like, instead of being a product of your environment, make your environment a product of you. Would you say that?
Yeah, exactly. Because ultimately, when you look at the brain and neuroplasticity, people think that, we can't control what happens in our brain. But neuroplasticity says that if we eat healthy, if we move our body, if we meditate, if we do yoga, we engage in these healthy habits on a day-to-day basis, that will create a healthy brain. So rather than saying, "Oh, I didn't do this for that reason," because it's very easy to make excuses for not doing things. We have to prioritize the things that are important, that are then those actions are gonna lead to, like I was just watching a video on LinkedIn with one of my, colleagues that I'm working on some real estate stuff with. He was basically saying that what we need to do in order to dictate our future, like to and influence our future, is we have to pretend as if that's our reality right now. That's how you ultimately manifest it and work it forward.
So did you hear that Albert Einstein experiment where he throws an object and it ends up affecting both sides of the equation, so to speak?
Mm,
And then he called it
totally.
spooky.
Mm.
You ever hear that?
I haven't heard that specifically, but I'm familiar with the concept you're getting at. But no, tell
Mm-hmm.
me more.
So, basically boiling it down into a nutshell is that the present is making both the past and the future at the exact same time.
Mm, I like that. That's deep. Because ultimately, I think the present moment is the only thing that's real. because the past is already done. And it's like that old phrase like tomorrow never comes, or like there's another one of my favorite quotes that, oh, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, and the present is a gift. That's because, like you're saying, if you can influence the present and mold your environment in the present, using the past as a, to contemplate and reflect on as a tool of growth, so you don't keep repeating the same mistakes, that's how the future is not going to be your past.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, if people are not connected to the present, the past is going to keep repeating in the future.
Then also, what about this where if you can't predict the future, then you basically make the future?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where there's always going to be a degree of unknown. And I think, like, coming back to the acceptance piece, like we talked about, we've got to accept that there's always going to be variables and things coming at us we're not going to know. And I think, like, for me, I make it a point to, because otherwise, if every little thing that happens that doesn't go according to plan, if that throws you off balance, it drains too much of your energy and you're not able to properly make decisions in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do you do this kind of balance of accepting what's coming at you and knowing that things are going to come at you, but then being ready to move and act on them quickly? Like in
Mm-hmm.
business, you've got to make decisions in real time, and being able to adapt and maneuver based on the world. And whether it's business or not, I think everybody can kind of adapt that to their own personal situation about being confident in their ability to make decisions.
Mm-hmm. That's why there's no time like the present, is that a number will never equate to presentness. Like there's no time on your watch that says now.
No, absolutely. Because ultimately we've got to be the ones that sees that now, because whether we're awake or we're asleep, it there's always going to be more things to do that are going to take our attention away from
Mm.
what we're doing right now, right? Like if you're multitasking, people love to multitask. So like multitasking it feels like, gives a feeling like you're more productive, but
Mm-mm.
every task is taking away from the other task.
Mm.
So you're actually, there's power in being able to have singular focus of a task
Mm-hmm.
for to be able to optimize efficiency, right? In
Mm-hmm.
whatever you're doing. Multitasking is ultimately taking away from it. And that's what it's difficult though, because once again, it comes back to so much information coming at us and our attention being pulled in
Mm-hmm.
so many different directions.
So is that by design, or is that just happenstance? Is that indirect thing?
I think the degree of it is by design, because the people that created social media platforms, they did those to grab our attention,
Mm-hmm.
and they make money off of advertisers that pay them to get eyeballs to look at their ads.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that part of it is by design, but where once again we've got to reclaim our sovereignty and our
Mm-hmm.
autonomy and independence as individuals. Just because Instagram and Facebook and those things, like I don't have an Instagram or a Facebook account.
Mm-hmm.
I did at one point, and I saw like how it was affecting my life,
Mm-hmm.
but I made the conscious choice to delete those
Mm-hmm.
accounts. And now I'm only on LinkedIn, and I filter very carefully as to what information I consume,
Mm-hmm.
because then if I consume that information,
Mm-hmm.
how is it going to contribute to me bettering myself and those that I serve? Anything beyond that, I look at is draining my resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because what you consume is ultimately what you give out too. That type of thing.
100%. 100%. So if you're very intentional about what you consume and what information you absorb, and then you put that information back out in a very, very thought out, articulated way, ultimately that's how you're going to be able to, like you mentioned, I think being in alignment with values. Like, how do you then truly bring yourself into alignment with your own values? If you're running in 30 different directions, first we have to define what those values are, right? Like that's, I think, where a lot of people could even start, that maybe listening to this, is just asking themselves what their values are.
Mm-hmm.
Because even like I asked myself that, and I would have to think about it, right? Like it would require some serious thought to sit down, write that out, and do a whole journaling exercise.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, because you said success, your ability to bounce back from setback, but what about also in the reverse, being able to adapt to set forwards from the progress that you do get and not getting that prisoner, or that dilemma, that imposter syndrome. What do you think about that too? Going both ways, right? Six.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely. Well, I think like the quote is the first step is recovering from the setback. Okay, I'm not going to let the setback bring me down, but now what am I going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Because say if somebody normally would spend a week or so pouting and being angry, because a lot of people get angry. That's a very very common emotion these days in response to a lot of things that are happening. So okay, if I don't get angry, all of a sudden I have a week of time now that I could do something different. And I think what you're describing as the next phase is like what am I then ultimately going to use that and then direct that forward, right? Like you're talking about like the step forward.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, what is that next step from that setback going to be? And then life is a constant, it's constantly happening with all different areas of our life, and just making those decisions.
Well, I would even say though, getting success, like you get setbacks, so you have defeat, temporary defeat, but also how do you handle the
Yeah.
temporary success of accumulating a bunch of money? Do you then go and spend that money on drugs and go that way, or you now have all this time at your disposal? How are you going to use that time, that set forward, that gain? How are you going to adapt to that also? So when your definition of success is how do you adapt and bounce back from setback, but how also do you adapt and you know bounce forward with the forwardness, because that comes with its own trials and tribulations, right?
Definitely, it does. And I think everybody goes through this in different phases. And I can speak to it for myself, right? Because I'm experiencing some business success in this last year or two. Money is coming in. It's then ultimately, what do I do with that money? I think it's having a plan. You know, how do you do your best to be one step ahead and be proactive? And I think that's where because you always have to be like 1, 2 to 3 steps ahead to the best of your ability, but not so far ahead that you're losing sight of the now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately you have to understand how your actions now are going to impact the next 2 to 3 steps you want to make, right? Like where am I going to be in 30, 60, 90 days? Like I was just talking to one of my business advisors and he gave me this exercise, super simple, and I loved it. Like I have it on my list tomorrow to write it out. But he's called it the 6 by 6.
Hmm.
And it's basically what are the 6 most important things you have to do in the next 6 weeks to move your business forward. And then he's like, I write that down and I have it next to me at my desk all day, every day. So
Mm-hmm.
that way I always know what I've got to get done in the short term. And then when you get those done, you rewrite it and you just keep on going and going. I was like, I love that because
Mm-hmm.
it's so simple, but it's super effective to organize your life.
So I would say with the one step ahead is that I almost think that some of these phrases that were given as we're growing up and basically handed off to the wolves, and which is like school, and because then it's just like kids leading kids teaching kids or something of that nature. To get to the point though, I think the philosophy is to just be one step ahead, because if you because that's all it takes to even win a race, is being just one step ahead of whoever is beside you. Or even in chess where where it's almost like a smoke and mirror tactic to say, hey, think 10 steps ahead, but all you have to do is be one step ahead.
Right. Because you don't need to always think 10 steps ahead. People want to think 10 steps ahead. I think 10 steps ahead is good 10 to 15% of the time. So you can have vision and bigger picture. But anything more than that, it pulls you away from now and distorts your perception of reality in the here and now,
Mm-hmm.
and can ultimately cause you to potentially make not the best decision if you're not seeing things clearly and you're overly like I think there's that's why they say like optimism is good to a certain degree, but you can abuse optimism and be too positive
Mm-hmm.
to the point it makes you naive to the negative. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where
Mm.
the negative isn't a bad thing, but
Mm.
how do you take into account the negative?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you look at the pros and cons, right? That's the most common example we know.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think, like you said, light and dark, where we've got to acknowledge the light and the dark on kind of both sides of the coin, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately see and judge what makes the most sense to make the best decision here in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like some wordplay, and which is you can't even get there without here. Like even in the word there is here. That comes before there. and to me these aren't even coincidences, or coincidences to me are purposeful. Like they were put there on purpose for a reason.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any coincidences in this world. I mean, it's once again like we're kind of throwing out some cliche statements and phrases and quotes, but we're really wanting to bring the. Go ahead.
So cliches then are timeless truths, are timeless classics. So there's nothing wrong with being cliche, because we wouldn't pass down lies from generation to generation. We don't need that. We throw that to the side, and what we need to hold on to are those cliches. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
exactly. And I think that's where, to really break them down further, to take it a step further, to understand them. Because I think there's people have heard these, but they don't necessarily know what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps providing a different perspective and shedding a different light on it for different people, I think, is what can help to expand your consciousness
Mm-hmm.
and your understanding and your perspective. Because I believe the whole world is, it's a lot of the game of perspective.
Mm.
Because we have the labels, right? Good, bad, right, wrong. But what's good to me may be bad to you. What's right to you may be wrong to me. Right? Like you get what, like
So
that's
see this, yeah, this is where though I think our good and bads, what's good for you is good for me, because I think we're all one and I think we're all connected.
hmm
And you hit on something just like a moment ago, which was about perception and optimism. So seeing the
yeah,
glass half full or half empty is irrelevant, and that goes to show you that reality is reality, and it's not the perception. It's your perception that makes your reality, but
yeah,
but it's not gonna change the actual reality of things, because the reality of things is that there's water in the glass, which is what we can both agree on.
yeah. Exactly. It's just what it's is it enough water for you, right? Like that's the question that you got to answer for yourself. It may be enough water for me, but that may not be enough water for you. So that's where everybody may have a different perception on how they look at the water in that glass.
And we might not know though, because it could be like the water boy water, where it was blessed from an Eskimo priest, and it's so dense. All you need is a little drop, and that inch will take you a mile.
That's that holy water. Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And I think that's where it's like what's coming to mind now is like the power of nourishment, right? There's been like a theme of what we've been talking about, which is being in the present moment, perception, really, really optimization, optimism, success, right? Like I think all of humanity's on this journey of evolution and
Mm.
wanting to better themselves right now. And I think that's where it's that journey is going to be different for everybody, but we're all feeling it to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that puts us in a position to have a what on a mental health level we call it like having a growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
versus a mindset of stagnation and just kind of consistency,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like how do I make myself better in each and everything that I do,
Because if you're
like
not growing, you're decaying. There's no in between. It's like you being on a treadmill. If you do nothing, you're definitely going backward. There's no in between. You're not going to stay on that treadmill.
yeah, you're not, because if you're on the treadmill to get results and the treadmill is not bringing you results, it's Einstein's classic definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where ultimately you got to not do the same thing over and over again unless you know it works.
And so
So it's
then
like
we can figure out what genius is by that definition and re-engineering it, which is like doing something different, expecting different results, or whatever that is. Like whoever, so, and this is where our definitions can vary and differ, which is like I think that's been beat out of us as kids too, is to say that like you're not a genius and I'm not a genius, but this test was just made by some person. And so when you can take back the power of these words, then that's part of like the freedom aspect of it, because you're not going to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, or a monkey's ability to swim in the water and be like, oh, you're no good at this, you get a bad grade, and we're all like, oh, but we all know we're different animals but the same beast. And so that's the whole disgustingness of the standardized test, is that they are trying to infiltrate our minds. And by they, I mean bad energy and demons, like a spiritual battle that we're fighting, and bad vibes. Because if evil had a face, we would have already killed it. We would have already killed that person, but it's not a person. The enemy is not of the flesh. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying? You get what I'm saying?
I do. I do. Yeah, because ultimately it's that opposing force, right? I mean, I think whether we choose to call it demons,
Star
these
Wars, light versus dark, Harry Potter, love versus hate.
yeah, they're all different personifications of there being an oppositional force to the good.
And
Like,
that's why we couldn't tell when somebody is happy, like Robin Williams, making everybody laugh. Obviously, rest in peace. And because the way he was expressing sadness was not any of our variations of sadness. Somebody can be smiling and be sad. We're all just an example of sadness, but we are not sadness ourselves. And that goes with the
right.
whole spectrum of emotion too. We're not evil, we're not love. All you can see are examples of these things. You see what I'm saying?
Well, it's an identity thing because it's like I say, like I am a businessman. Like I'm not a businessman. I do business. There's a difference between
I'm a
labeling yourself.
businessman.
I'm a businessman. Yeah.
Shout out.
Yeah, yeah, no, but it's a cool thing because like we use all these different labels to define ourselves and label other things and other people. But at the end of the day, we are who we are. We're not even our name. Our name is still something we call ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine how we respond to our name, right? Like, like, but we have the ability to change our name, same way that we have the ability to change our identity. I
Mm.
believe that, we can change that identity by doing all the things we're talking about doing and shifting our
Mm.
perspective and the way that we move through the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we ultimately come back to this once again, just to reiterate this whole theme of creating and manifesting our reality. I don't even like using the word manifesting because I think that implies that you sit there and don't do anything and it's just going to
Mm.
happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I talk about it in the form of action
Mm-hmm.
and looking at it like, because ultimately we can't just think our way to a better reality. We have to, it starts with thought, but then we have
Mm-hmm.
to back up that thought with action.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise we're going to be in the same position we started in, chasing our tail.
Mm-hmm. And to me though, even talking is action, writing is action. Like what we're doing here, we're actually taking moves to enlighten
Yeah.
ourselves and other people. We're being unselfishly selfish in that way, because I do think life is a circle, and I do think whatever I do to you is going to come back to me. um and you were
Mm,
talking about names, and there is a name that we all share, and that's you, because everyone answers to
mm,
you, but you don't answer to everyone. You see what I'm saying?
mm. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, no, because it's a different perspective on it because we, like you were saying earlier, we are all connected. Like there is that kind of unifying force, and I think that's love. I think that's what brings everybody together.
Hmm. But at the same time, we're separate. Somehow
Yeah,
that's possible because life is paradoxical. Two opposing views can still be the same, can still be acceptable, can still be correct, accurate.
yeah,
I am
it
me.
is.
Mm-hmm. What are you thinking?
Yeah, no, I agree with you because like the world works in a paradox, and it's this theme of kind of light and dark and opposing forces, opposing things. And I think ultimately what that gives us is the ability to see through what's happening right now and like ultimately just dictate who we are in it all because we have the choice. We have the power of choice in the here and now. Like that's the one thing that we control is we have the ability to choose. We can choose what we do, but I think like you also mentioned the victim side of things
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of times where it may not feel like we have the choice
Mm-hmm.
is because it's easy to have like jealousy and envy for somebody that has more things than I do.
Mm.
So we may not be able to choose who we're born to,
Mm.
but we're able to choose what we do with that circumstance that we're born into.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where the choice lies. So it's like, am I going to be angry at my parents for my childhood, or am I going to do something different in adulthood to work towards bettering myself and those around me?
Yeah, it's Viktor Frankl wrote a book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Uh,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
Familiar.
I think it really should be person's path to meaning or whatever. What did I just say the book title is? Viktor Frankl's
Man's search for meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning. It should be People's Search for Meaning.
People search for meaning. Yeah. Yeah.
And the whole idea was that the one thing that you control is your response to a situation.
Exactly. Because it's like it's this whole in psychology it's like the whole stimuli versus response.
Mm.
And I think a lot of people, it's responding versus reacting. Then we're getting into like a stress management technique
Mm-hmm.
where people experience stress on a day to day, but ultimately most people react to their stress versus responding. Like a reaction is like this happens and then boom, like what's that first thought, that initial kind of primal instinct, versus
Mm.
a response is you pause and then think like, okay, what am I going to do next? Like there's a pause between the stimuli and the response to that stimuli.
Mm. Basically, reacting is that there's no pause. Something happened, I do this.
Right. Like, you know how some people, if they have a tendency towards anger,
Mm-hmm.
you may say something they don't like and they may say something mean,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of without, like, say something without thinking, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
perfect example
Mm-hmm.
that I think we've all experienced. So rather than being the person that says something that they may end up regretting and having to apologize for,
Mm-hmm.
in that moment somebody says something to anger you, before you act on that, before you speak on that, you could simply just take a breath and say, like, I appreciate you for sharing that with me. Like, do you mind if I just take a moment to think about that or get back to you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a difference. Like, that would be reacting versus responding in that situation.
I almost want to attribute it to, well, what about this? That it's the fight, flight, or freeze. Then would the freeze be the pause to figure out what you have to do in this situation?
Yeah, because a freeze is a defense mechanism in that moment to not have to act, because you may, like, we all have that initial primal response. There's a part of our brain that's triggered in those moments, and that leads to, kind of a knee jerk response, so to speak. But that knee jerk response is typically based in trauma. So if, like, that's where, if we people say something to trigger us, or something that may offend us, that there may be some negative belief attached to that, and that would then be the driver of that next action, versus coming at it from a space of a well thought out solution, which are higher level brain functions that
Mm.
require you to activate your brain and think.
Mm-hmm.
More of an active process versus just, I'm gonna do it.
And from the beginning, we talked about like people feeling stale, like a stagnation in things. So I think I have a way to break that too. Is that it's a first time for everything. Peeling back another layer is saying even though it's our like 11,000th day on Earth, we were born,
Mm-hmm.
but it's our first 11,000th day on Earth.
Mm. Yeah, because today is the only time there's ever going to be today. Like, every day is today.
Uh huh.
So, like, there's another quote that I like. It's like, today is the first day of the rest of your life, but then every day is the first day of the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, you wake up with like that type of mentality,
Mm-hmm.
getting out of bed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty hard to fall from that.
Mm-hmm.
To be motivated to want to do good things that day,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, I think what weighs us down in the present is the baggage of the past.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're able to consciously release that, it's going to put you in a much better position to make the most of today.
Mm-hmm. So I think another way of there's this thing FOMO, right?
Yeah.
Where you think you're missing out, but you're missing nothing because everything is everything. So do I give you how I see that phrase, or do you have a what is your, should I give you what I have on that phrase, or should you, what do you think about that phrase, everything is everything?
Everything is everything. I mean, I think it comes back to that whole statement of oneness, where it's like
Mhm.
everything is tied to everything, but then like everything can be nothing at the same time, because whatever is everything really comes back to what somebody's definition of that's going to be. I think it's really a matter of perspective on it.
Mhm.
You
So
know.
so this is like everything is everything. Like I'm not the first one to say this. Well, yeah, actually, I'm the first one to say it, like from my perspective, which is, so this that we're doing is everything, but everything is not this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit of a tongue twister, but I think that's also it's up for interpretation.
So, for instance, that's why there's no FOMO, is that because
Well, I think with FOMO, it's I think if you want to talk about fear, right? It's the fear of missing out.
mm,
It's a perception that you're going to miss something important, but what if something important never happens?
mm,
Because you're almost creating a scenario in your mind, and I think that highlights a bigger problem with what people do to create anxiety, because anxiety stems from fear.
mm,
Fear is what underlies anxiety, and the word anxiety is thrown around everywhere these days. So the fear of missing out is you're ultimately creating a scenario in your head that doesn't exist, because what you think you may miss out on may never even happen. I think that's why people can experience it, but if you realize that it's really just a fictitious scenario, then ultimately that's a way to kill FOMO right there.
all right, so I have it because I wrote it down. So, definition of everything, sum of somethings. Okay? So, when I ask you to grab me everything, a hypothetical situation, and you'll grab me a fork, a knife, a spoon, for example, but I didn't ask you to grab me a fork, a knife, a spoon.
Mm.
But you are grabbing those items because instinctually you know every item is everything, but everything is not that item,
Mm. Yeah.
because you need the totality of all things to become everything. You need the totality of the somethings. So yeah, so not only is a spoon is also everything. Not only is a fork is everything. So this that we're doing is everything, but everything is not this because it's also that.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying now? Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
And that kills FOMO because you're missing nothing, because like nothing doesn't exist.
yeah, everything exists. It's- yeah, no, I mean we're pondering the deeper things in life right now, because a lot of times there's not a clear cut answer to these types of things, man.
I
It's
think there is though, bro. I think there's an absolute right and an absolute wrong. There is no gray area where they try to say black and white though makes gray. Why would you use a subjective analogy to unobjectify an objective?
Yeah, no, I think it's well, I think the only place where a gray area does exist are for the people that don't understand what the right and wrong is. I think that's where they're stuck in the gray area.
You remember
And
this though, right? Like
remember the
even growing up, like did you ever hear about the gray area, and there is no right and wrong?
Yeah, yeah, I mean I've heard people say that. I do believe that there's I don't know, it's hard to really put in words, but I just think that the way a gray area can exist is where people's perception are, because they can argue different than that. That's where, like, even if there may be a true right and wrong, other people can contest that and create their own variation of what's right and wrong to them, right? Like people that would commit and I hate to use this example, but people that commit murder,
Mm-hmm.
and then they may feel like that's the right thing to do in that moment,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the right thing to do in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where these people are stuck in the gray area because they've got that right and wrong twisted backwards in that case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because even that person that does a bad thing is thinking that they're doing a right thing. Nobody's that twisted where they're gonna go, I'm gonna do a bad thing and get a good result.
In that case, then
You see what I'm
they
saying?
because what they think is bad is in their mind is good,
Uh huh.
and that's a good result of a bad thing that they did. On some level, they know it's a bad thing, but they have to justify themselves. It's a good thing in order to go and do it because even bad people likely still have some level of conscience, even if they're not bad people. But people that do bad things,
Mm-hmm.
they have some conscience, but they have to ultimately override that conscience
Mm-hmm.
by trying to convince themselves it's good. And that's, I think, where there's trouble in that gray area, because that gray area you can twist and create and make up whatever story you want to believe, and then that can become your reality. That's
Mm-hmm.
the how it can be you. That's the good and bad of belief and perspective. Is you can choose to believe the wrong thing and use that for the wrong reasons, or you can do it on the other end where you can use it for the right reasons to help people.
So it's all about getting perception to line up with reality, because there is a true reality of things like the glass and the water. Just because your perception is that there's a half full or a half empty, that's irrelevant. It's that there's water in the glass. That's all we should even assign to that or label it. And what I would like to say also is that it's all about the feelings, because I feel like we have been
Yeah.
told to beat our feelings out of us and rely on the thinking, and to think that thinking is the thing that is the greatest of all and not the feeling. But the
It's
thinking
not.
stems from the feeling. Thought experiment. We just drop here. All we have are our instincts, our senses, our feelings. That's where all
And
this
I think
stems from. Every feeling, every word is a feeling, but not every feeling is a word. Hence, why we cry, why we laugh. You see what I'm saying?
and I think the people suppress the feeling side of it, and they try to use it. There's an imbalance between logic and reason, because in the brain we have certain areas that are in charge of reason and logic. It's like left brain versus right brain thinking is the oversimplification.
Yeah, dude. Why are 95% of people right-handed, which only deals with the logical side of things on the left brain, and the left hand's for the right side, which is the artistic side? We're supposed to use both. Something, and that's why it's not a person, which is so unfortunate, because if it was, I would want to get personal with it and it would be that much easier, but it's not. It's simple, but simple is not equated to easy. And there's some sort of force or some kind of wanting to fit in that is making us like. I started writing with my right hand because I saw everybody else was, and that was the old me. This is, the now me. So I'm not. The old me is the me of now, but the me of now is not the old me. That's the Russian doll paradox too, where the little doll
Right.
fits in. So you're still a kid, or that kid is still you, but you are not that kid. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And even the kid's trying to get beat out of us. And now I'm putting on my dukes like, yo, you're not taking over the little kid inside of me that is getting all of this.
No, because there's nothing wrong with the little kid inside of us. It made us who we are today, but we still got to show love for that little kid in the end, because I think that's where a lot of when people have early childhood trauma, they're not able to make peace with the child
Mm.
inside themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that child is still in the driver's seat as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people don't have that understanding and awareness that ultimately we got to be able to show love to that child with ourselves and forgive them and forgive family for what they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's where people look to do drugs, and then you're manipulating the feeling and you're filtering it so you're not getting the rawness of it, which is what pushes people to go into suicide, because they have only focused on the happy and not the other flip side of the coin, which is the negative. So all they're seeing all the time is sunshine, 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 but they don't know that rain still exists, and they forget that rain even exists. Basically, when you only feel one way all the time, you feel nothing.
Yeah.
And that's
Because,
and then they stumble over and they commit suicide.
well, you can never ultimately just feel one thing. I mean, we feel a range of emotions, and like I was just saying a moment ago, is we got to feel those emotions and express those emotions and connect. That's why, like, as a man, like we live in an overly masculine culture where vulnerability as a man is shamed, and I think that it's wrong. I think vulnerability is actually a strength. It ultimately gives us the ability to be authentic in who we are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how do you do that in a safe way?
Mm.
Because I think a lot of people have been hurt and judged at different times, so that takes away their sense of safety and being able to feel vulnerable in different situations.
I don't know that there is a safe way to do that though, Anish, because
Yeah.
when you take off the armor, you're susceptible to the arrows and the sword and the bullet. So immediately being vulnerable, there goes the safety net. That's what being vulnerable is,
And
right
I
or wrong.
think that's where, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's where we live in a time where we can't be vulnerable 24/7 because, like you said, that leaves us open to being wounded. But it's how do you develop the discernment and knowing when is a safe time to be vulnerable? And there never may be a fully safe time, but how do you able to let that armor off? Because there's been periods in my life where I've gone with the armor fully on no matter what, and it gets exhausting. You can't function like that
Mm.
because you're ultimately only hurting yourself by choosing to hold on to pain, right? Like I chose to hold on to pain in certain situations with people that may have done certain things in the past, and then you believe everybody's going to do those things to you, and you choose not to let go of your armor,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and that
Mm.
and that puts you in a difficult position because you're essentially then just reliving those trauma cycles from the past. So in order to move through that, you have to take off your armor and choose to learn to trust again. Otherwise, you think you're never going to be able to trust anybody.
Mm. Yeah, I see what you're also saying. Like, no warrior wears their armor all the time anyway. Like, you would get exhausted trying to hold on to the armor. Like, when you're ready to go
Exactly.
to war, I guess, you put the armor on. But if you're just, in the garden or whatever, like, that's the time to not wear the armor, per se.
Right. And I think that there's not shame in having the armor on, but like a key word is discernment.
Hmm.
Because now I'm becoming very discerning about, how I allocate my time, who do I relate to, if I'm going to take this call, what's the purpose of the call? Just being incredibly discerning about things I didn't think about before, and that's how I'm being even more intentional with my life. And part of that is being vulnerable in certain situations,
Hmm.
right? Particularly with women, because there've been certain relationships, not to go into detail of it, but where things, you trusted people and then you end up getting hurt,
Hmm.
right? You got your heart broken, right? That's a
Hmm.
common phrase
Hmm.
in that world. But then in order to able to safely go into that situation again, I got to take my armor off and learn to trust again.
Hmm.
But then ultimately, I just had my armor on and thought that that situation was going to continue to repeat itself.
So, another thing with the everything's everything, because we're talking about people and that kind of thing, everyone is everyone. So, what this is saying is, like, I ask you to bring me everyone, and you bring me John, John, Julia, and Joseph.
Yeah.
So, John, Julia, and Joseph are everyone, but everyone is not John, Julia, and Joseph. You see what I'm saying
Yeah.
there? So you are in a relationship with you, in a sense.
Exactly. So, like, regardless if it's a romantic relationship, a business relationship, a family relationship, just our ability to relate to other people is largely reflective of our ability to relate to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we're ultimately, it's like we're saying, if we talk to ourselves well, if we have, high self love, if we respect ourselves, if we define our values and act in accordance with those values, we're going to attract other people that think that way too.
Mm-hmm.
Versus on the opposite side, if we're depressed, we live in shame and guilt, we beat ourselves up on a daily basis, that is going to attract more of those people that do the same thing. And I've experienced both sides of those coins, right? Where when I was younger, I may have not had the most productive relationships around me, but that's why I'm super intentional now about who I relate to and how, and if I'm going to spend time with them, especially in person. Like, I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a loner, but I love my seclusion just for my peace of mind, where
Mm.
I can't just like always go to business networking events or conferences every week because that would drain my energy. I need my time to recharge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say attraction is magnetism, right?
Yeah.
Your equal opposite. Um, then I would go on to say, yeah, you can't fill somebody else's glass if your glass is empty.
Correct. And I think that's it's like, how do you keep adding to your glass? Well, what are you pouring into your glass? What does your glass consist of? And that's like you said, it's between me, myself, and I. You know, it's ultimately, how do I relate to myself on a day-to-day basis? And everybody does it. But it's what is that self-dialogue? It's like, are you giving yourself permission to not go to the gym today, or are you going to go to the gym today, regardless of how you feel?
Mm-hmm.
Like just a very practical example of self-talk and how that can result in us reaching our fitness goals or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did hear something about the gym is a date with yourself. Don't cancel.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool because you're scheduling time out of your day to do something that's good for yourself. And I think, you know, just speak on the health and wellness front, like with the people that we work with, we teach them how do you structure self-care into your day,
Mm.
right? So it's the most important thing that you can do, for like an hour or two in the morning and then 30 minutes to an hour before bed at night.
Mm-hmm.
That way you start the day with yourself and you end the day with yourself.
Hmm.
And then during the day, if you can just pepper little bits of that in here for like 2, 3, 4 minutes, right? Like, I'm stressed out, so I'm gonna just close my eyes and take a few deep breaths. Like, that's doing something for yourself to be able to recharge your energy and manage your stress throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, I also get what you're saying about having to recharge by yourself, alone time, which is like we both have those thoughts in our head where there's like the devil and God on our shoulder. So then when you go out to meet other people, they have those same two people fighting them. And so if you're allowing that person to if you're going to consume what that person is saying and things of that nature, then it can get overwhelming if you're having a hard time fighting off the good and the bad forces, cuz then you're also like giving your energy to help them fight their good and bad forces at the same time. And you're almost
Yeah.
having to combat that because it's like a supernatural thing where like the demon gets in, just like Sam and Dean Winchester. I don't know if you've seen like the Supernatural show.
No, I haven't.
Basically, they're fighting
Heard of it.
demons, and demons can get into people, and
Oh,
so
sounds intense.
yeah, and so they're having to deal with that person in front of them while also making sure their self is secured and not allowing the demons to get to them. That kind of thing.
Well, yeah, it's important. I mean, I think that's a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
I mean, I think something you could extract from the TV show is like, how do you not let the demons of the world get inside you and
Mm-hmm.
impact and influence what you do, versus kind of how do you, connect to the angel on the right shoulder versus the devil on the left shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
and have that angel guide you so you can ultimately, because I believe if you show yourself love, if you spread yourself love
Mm-hmm.
or spread other people love,
Mm-hmm.
that's how you can be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think otherwise, like everybody, it's a classic age-old pursuit of happiness. Everybody's
Mm.
on this pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do think like I'm a firm believer in the law of karma, not just because I'm Indian, but like it's just you do good and then good things will happen, and if you do bad, bad things will happen. It's an oversimplification, but once again, I think there's beauty in simplicity. Is I think really been the whole theme of this conversation,
Yeah, I don't.
and that.
I don't. Simplicity, like a fool can make anything complicated, but it takes a genius to make it simple. And simple
Mhm.
does not equate to easy. Simple is difficult.
Yeah, it is, and I think the fact it's difficult isn't a bad thing. I think that it it gives you, because at least gives you like a direction to move on, right? Like all these different, like the cliches, like I like what you said earlier about like, it's, well, what's the problem with it being cliche? There's nothing wrong with it being cliche. It's then but then still breaking it down and understanding what it means. Like that,
So,
I think, is the key.
so for example, a thing that I always hear, an adage, which is, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? You ever hear that?
Yeah.
However,
Oh yeah.
that's even wrong. The darkness is so good at the smoke and mirrors, that phrase is even wrong. Life is a journey. There's no end, no beginning to it. Even a marathon is a race. They just lengthen the race to make you not process it correctly. Whatever they is, again, going back to they being demons, being dark energy, not the light, bad vibes, bad energy.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? The
It's
yin
that
and the yang.
oppositional force. Yeah.
So another thing is like breaking down the cliches. Fear nothing but fear, basically. Fear, like, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Which is to
Mm.
say, the only thing you don't want to happen in your life is to fear anything, because anything is everything and you ultimately end up fearing everything.
Mm.
Is that making sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's deep stuff we're talking about here today because it's really just contemplating, I think, the deeper meanings of life and how we exist in the world because we just live in a time where there's so much turmoil. It's like you said, we question everything. I think you're at a point where you got to question things in order to redefine your thought process because the way that we're taught to think ultimately has does not work. It's a broken system. We're recreating the system right now as we speak.
Mm.
Just think, let that sit for a second because we're consciously questioning paradigms, systems, bureaucracies that have been created for mankind to operate by, but those systems have not been created with our best intention in mind,
Mm.
largely with profit being
Mm.
the motive of a lot of the people that created it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care to go down into the specifics of that, but that once again, I believe the only solution to that is by us reclaiming our ability to think and to act according to what we believe in and who we are
Mm.
versus who other people want us to be.
Mm-hmm. So the one thing talking about the bureaucracy then is, I have no right to tell you what to do, and vice versa. You have no right to tell me what to do. Reason I say that is that the truth of the matter is that I know that I don't know. Because that's also like, that's also going back to the happiness theme, which is that ignorance is bliss. The ignorance is you not knowing. The blissfulness is knowing that you don't know.
Yeah. Because a lot of people don't even know that they can't even admit that they don't know because they think no they know everything.
Right, so there's four types of that. There's thinking you know, which is a no, which is to say that that person is adopting the ideal that they know everything. Then there's the another variation, which is I know that I don't know, which leaves you beautifully right in the middle of the paradox and going around and around, which is to say that I know nothing about everything and I know everything about nothing. So I know nothing about everything and I know everything about nothing. And that leaves you knowing something and leaves you knowing not something.
Yeah, that's that paradox again. That's it. That's it.
Because I'm you and you are me, but I'm also not you and you're not me, because we both answer to you. You is everybody, but everybody is not you. That's how you fit in, is by being different. If you try, because then we're the puzzle pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, and ultimately we're the pieces of the puzzle that have to make the world tick. So it's the world is going to tick based on what the individual puzzle pieces do. So it's like if they come together and create a new system and a
Mm-hmm.
new way of believing and living life where it's ultimately is in our good and we speak up loud enough and enough kind of steam comes behind it. I think that's what is going to have to take to make real change in the world.
So then to keep going on with that is there's people that don't know that not knowing is knowing. So yeah, they don't know that they know, because they'll say I don't know, but then they're not looking at the flip side of it, that is a part, that's part knowledge, knowing that you don't know. They haven't got to that
Right.
place yet. And then the other people is the people that don't even know that they don't know,
Mm.
which is to say they don't know everything, they don't know nothing, and they don't even know the something.
Yeah. No, because most people don't realize that. They just don't. People think that they know more than they actually do. That's just the unfortunate nature of the beast.
Hmm.
Well, this was good though, man. We covered a lot today. I mean, I think to like, to like wrap up, I think my finishing thoughts would be that, like, for anybody listening, is how could we learn to just live more in the moment, live present, live peacefully, do good for others, understanding that there's so much wisdom already out there in the world that exists, and it may not be readily available to us, but if we seek that knowledge and we seek that wisdom, we can ultimately better ourselves and those around us. And I just think that the more people that adopt that mindset, the world will just overall be a better place. I mean, that's genuinely the message, that because I do a number of different podcasts, and that's just what I share, is that just how do we get back to the basics and just kind of make the world a better place. And I think if everybody does their part, it'll all add up to good. No amount is too little. It's every little bit counts.
Little things add up to the big things. Anything is everything. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Absolutely.
Yo, will we get a part two? Will we do a
Yeah,
part two?
absolutely, bro. Yeah, yeah. No, we'll definitely look. To be continued. Dot dot dot.
Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good. It's good stuff, man. I mean, we just keep doing good things, spreading the good message to the world, and just I'm looking forward to coming back and doing our thing.
All right, bro. Let's stay in touch. Yeah, I would love to
Absolutely.
keep going. I could keep going, but
Yeah.
yeah, we said we were gonna do an hour, right? So we'll stick to that script. And
Absolutely.
I love you.
I love you too, bro. That's what it's all about. It's all love. Keep doing your thing. Well, obviously we'll be in touch, and let's rock and roll.
All right, brother. The one and
Sounds good.
only Aneesh Chaudhry, baby.
Thank you, Mr. Victor Hall, legend.
You're the legend. You're the legend, baby.
Woo! Let's go.
All right,
Right
brother.
on. Beaver Creek in the house.
I'm cutting the recording.
Hell